Hello everybody, hope you guys are enjoying your day. Today we're going to be looking at potential tropical storm Isaias, which is currently in the eastern Caribbean, and it's going to be making its way throughout the northern Caribbean, moving throughout the Bahamas, and then potentially moving up the east coast. We'll be talking about that in today's video, as well as my personal hurricane track forecast for this, as well as my personal hurricane intensity forecast for this storm. Now, here is your current National Weather Service page, and then we'll start looking at the tropics. We have heat advisories over parts of the northwest, red flag warnings further to the south from there, and excessive heat warnings further south than there. Now, we also have a stalling low pressure system that is going to be bringing some flood conditions throughout portions of the south central, and that includes parts of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and also into Colorado there. We also have some heat advisories for parts of the northeast and the mid-Atlantic there due to some very, very warm conditions. We have a high pressure system in place right now, and that is bringing those very, very warm conditions. Now, here is your disturbance out in the Eastern Caribbean. That is Invest 92L. We have an 80% chance of developing within the next 48 hours, and within the next 5 days, a 90% chance. So within the next 2 days, I would say is the best chance that you would see for this turning into a tropical storm. The next 2 to 3 days or so. Tropical Depression Hannah off to the left side of your screen right there. Here is current Hurricane Douglas, and it's over northwesternmost Hawaii currently. Now, here is Tropical Depression Hannah currently, and you do see that it is, I would say, about 200, 300 miles southwest of Texas right now, and that is currently in north central Mexico, and it's just west of the mountains there, and it's going to be heading even further westward before becoming a post-tropical system. Now, here it is your rainfall accumulation forecast from the Weather Prediction Center, and they are bringing in the higher elevations about 4 to 8 inches of rainfall. In the lower elevations, about 1 to about 3 inches of rainfall should be expected. Now, here is your model track guidance, bringing it further to the west for most of these models, and they could potentially turn it further to the north. Either way, this is going to be a very weak system by that point. Within the next 2 days, it should be pretty much off our radar because it'll be so weak by that point. Now, here is Hurricane Douglas, and that is about 20 miles north there of Hawaii, and that will be making impact with those regions. It's currently making impact with those regions with those hurricane force wind speeds. Now, here is your hurricane cone, and you do see it's going to stay as a hurricane over the next few hours, and then should weaken by tonight into a tropical storm, stays a tropical storm all the way until Wednesday morning, and then by Wednesday night it should be a tropical depression as it starts to pass the international date line and it moves into the western Pacific. By that point, hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings in effect for parts of northwestern Hawaii and the Leeward Islands of Hawaii. Now, here is your key messages for Hurricane Douglas. You can pause the video right here and read them if you're interested, or you can go to hurricanes.gov to go look at this in further detail. Now, here is your model track guidance for Hurricane Douglas, and again, this is going to be moving westward and then curving further to the north, but by that point, it should be well into the Pacific, not really impacting any land by that point. Here is your GEFS tracks, your GFS ensemble models, and they are bringing this straight westward with a little curve to the north later on in the forecasting period. Now, here is your tropical storm force wind speed probabilities, and for parts of northwestern Hawaii, you do have about a 70 to 90% chance of a tropical storm force wind speeds. Now, for 58 mile per hour wind speeds, you have about 40 to about 70% chance over that same region, and then for hurricane wind speeds, you have about a 5 to 30% chance of that. While offshore, you will have probably about a 50 to about 80 or 90% chance of those hurricane wind speeds. Now, here are your model intensity guidance, and this is plotting a bunch of models and putting them on an intensity graph, and they are bringing this down to a tropical storm by about the next 12 to 36 hours, and then by the next about 72 to about 120 hours, it should be weakening into a tropical depression or some sort of post-tropical system. Now, here is current Invest 92L at about 12 degrees north by about 45 degrees west or so. Now, here is your track for this storm, and this is going to be tracking to the west north of the Caribbean, and just clipping parts of the Leeward Islands, northeastern Puerto Rico and northern Puerto Rico, maybe just clipped by this, and it's gonna move north of the Dominican Republic, not even gonna touch Haiti, and then move into the Bahamas as it tracks further to the north and to the east and moves up the southeast coast. Now, here's another group of models, and this is the GFS ensemble models, the American models, and they are bringing this further to the coast than most of these models are. Now they are further west, but even if it is this close to the shore, it doesn't mean that all these areas are going to be impacted. This is going to be a fairly small system and a fairly compact system. So even though it may be a few hundred miles offshore, it's still, you really won't even notice it by that point, and it might actually just bring some cooler conditions due to kind of dipping the jet stream for the storm. Now, that would really bring down those temperatures, but other than that, I don't think there will be too many impacts, except for areas potentially in Cape Cod in Massachusetts and also southeastern New England, as well as eastern North Carolina and eastern Virginia could potentially see an impact. If we do see what these few models are actually showing, these group of models right here, we could have a similar situation to potential tropical storm Faye. So we could see potentially the same situation break out, probably to a lesser degree though, as tropical storm Faye. Here are your Canadian ensemble models, and these are a little bit more all over the place. You have less models in this one, but they're a little bit closer to the shore as well. This model right here, this is kind of what I'm talking about with the potential coastal impacts. If you were to see a track like this, that would probably be the worst case scenario, because it would be far enough offshore that it's still strengthening, but it wouldn't be far enough offshore that you wouldn't be feeling impacts. You would probably have some rough surf, maybe some rainfall out of that, and maybe some gusty winds as well. Here is your European ensemble models, and they are bringing this also pretty much what the GEFS models are showing, with the same thing. They have a group of models that are further to the west and another bigger group that are kind of just offshore. Now, here is the intensity guidance, and you might be wondering why this is so much lower. Well, it's actually because, yesterday it was showing potentially a Category 2, Category 3 hurricane. Right now, it's right at a high-end tropical storm, and this has been lowering, and you'll see that in my personal intensity guidance in just a few moments. But that's mainly due to a area of wind shear that it is going to be interacting with. It's also going to be interacting with some drier air, and we'll be talking about that in just one moment. But right now, it will strengthen most likely to a tropical storm within the next 24 to about 48 hours, and then into a high-end tropical storm by the next about 60 to 96 hours. So now, here is your current sea surface temperatures. You have about 30 degree or 26 to 30 degree temperatures in terms of Celsius over much of the Atlantic, except for parts of the coastal Northeast. That's where you have about 20 to about 26 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures. Usually you want 26 degrees Celsius or 80 degree Fahrenheit waters that can sustain a hurricane, and you have that all the way up to New Jersey, so that is well above average. And if we actually look at your anomalies, these are about 5 degrees Celsius above normal, and that would be about 8 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit above the normal. So let's say over parts of the coastal Northeast, maybe your sea surface temperatures are at about 75 degrees. At this time of year, you should be in the 65 range over that same region. So it is well above average, especially as you see in coastal New England there, where you have the highest values there. Now, here is your ocean heat content map, and you do see we have values of about 50 to, I would say, about 100 in some isolated locations. That'll really help fuel these storms, but this isn't a necessary ingredient for a hurricane or a tropical storm. It's just something that can help it grow. Now, here is your Saharan dust and your dry air, and you do see we do have a decent amount of it, and if you actually look at the track of this, which would be something like this, over that area, you're seeing a dramatic area of wind shear right throughout this region. So that is something that's very concerning in terms of the system, or in terms of the setup for this. That would really weaken this storm if it were to interact with that area of dry air and wind shear, which it does look like it will do. Now, here is your some of your models. So we're going to start looking at the GFS model and what it's showing. This is a lower end model, and what this is kind of on the lower end of the solutions. And then we also have a higher end model, which would be the Canadian model, which I'll also show you. So I'm thinking somewhere in between there. The Canadian Hurricane showing a Category 1 hurricane all the way up into the northeast, and the GFS barely showing a tropical storm. So here is by Wednesday, and you're seeing we have a tropical depression on our hands, or a weak tropical storm by this point. And then as you get into Thursday, it's starting to ramp up into a decent tropical storm as it's starting to head north of the Leeward Islands and the Windward Islands. But most of the strongest gusts are going to be on the northern side of this storm, so don't worry too much if you do live on anywhere near Puerto Rico or so, mainly because most of the gusty winds are going to be offshore. And then by the time it gets to Friday, as it's north of Puerto Rico, it will be really, really weak by this point. Just a low pressure system, and just any regular low pressure system, might raise the wind speeds just by a little. Now let's start looking at your Canadian model. And by the way, if you're curious, the GFS model basically dips this high pressure system further to the south, which in turn brings some drier air into the mix, and then the GFS model just kind of spins this around it. Doesn't really strengthen it from there. So this is kind of the last frame I'm going to show you of the GFS. Now here's the Canadian model and what it's showing. So already by Wednesday we have a tropical storm. Then by by Thursday you have a stronger tropical storm, and it weakens slightly as it gets into Friday, weakens a lot more as it gets into Sunday, and then as we're starting to get into August 2nd, by Monday, August 3rd, it's already a stronger tropical storm. And then as you get into Tuesday, it's a hurricane by this point. And then if you get as you get later on in Tuesday, so Tuesday afternoon, you're already getting coastal impacts as a hurricane. You're getting tropical storm force wind speeds, and you're also getting hurricane wind speeds as well, just offshore of there. And then it moves into the Gulf of Maine by about Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. So that is the kind of, we have two different solutions, and that's going to be the hardest thing. Figuring out whether this high pressure is gonna dip further to the south, leading it to go further to the east into colder waters and really weakening this, or whether this will just move up the east coast, and in that case it will strengthen quite a bit from there. Now here's my personal forecast in terms of the track of this storm, and I am expecting this to go just north and west, kind of stay on the same track as it heads into the northern Caribbean, and then it should stay all the way until the Bahamas. This is the next 5 days, so from today all the way until the 31st, the last day of this month, and then by the 31st, it should be just reaching the Bahamas and about to make its decision on whether it's just going to move around this high pressure system or move up the east coast. We'll have to see about that. Now, here's my personal intensity forecast. I'm thinking this is going to be a middle level tropical storm within the next 24 to 48 hours, and then by the next 72 to 96 hours, it should stay as a high end tropical storm, maybe a category 1, and then within the next 96 plus hours, it should start weakening a little bit as it starts to move up the east coast into those cooler waters. Now, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.